The Cavs are off to what is actually, this is not being hyperbolic, the most exciting start in franchise history. And in honor of that, I thought we had to throw it back on this channel to give you one more episode of the Cavs Attack. So I brought on Ab here to kind of talk about this. Cavs starting undefeated. So much of when we were doing the podcast regularly about the Cavs, we spent talking about, hey, you need to be patient. These guys are young. They're still
Right.
developing. Look at the age. Look at the timeline for all of these other teams with their superstars. It usually doesn't hit until like year 4, year 5. We have
Yeah.
this on football timelines. It's not on football timelines, right? We spent a lot of time doing that. We also spent a lot of time complaining about the rotations. And it feels like we have finally got to the part of the timeline where we get to be vindicated on all of that because that is what this Cavs team looks like. I heard people say, oh, it's the same team from last year. I'm like, sure, but when your best players are under 25, that developmental part, right?
Yeah.
That changes stuff. Like Giannis when he was 23 is not Giannis when he was 25.
Yeah, and the health factor of all of it, I think, plays a huge role too. Like it feels like it's the longest all the core four have been able to play together for, an extended amount of time. And I think especially when you're a young player, that matters a lot too. I did want to say one other thing before we, get deeper into this. I think a lot of your listeners recently found my YouTube channel because my last episode, I had so many comments from people saying, I was wondering where you went. I listened to you and Quincy back in the day on Cavs Attack. So it was great timing for that. And they were like, I was so happy to find you again. And I hope you're all here then and can hear me back on here too.
Yeah, awesome, awesome, awesome. The thing about this Cavs team I think is interesting is one, the maturation of Evan Mobley, but also I think the maturation of the game plan around Evan Mobley. Like I've was posting on Blue Sky and I was making a point. I'm like, they have so many guys on the court who can pass the basketball well
Yeah.
that when you watch this team, and it's rare that you see this like 10 games in, they move the ball even when they're playing poorly with such
Yeah.
precision and efficiency that it rivals some of the stuff that you used to see with like Leandro Barbosa in like the 2013, 2014 Spurs. Like it's the only other team that I've seen like, cause like even what the Budenholzer Bucks didn't move the ball that well. The Hawks team that everybody like compares every team that they don't believe in to, they didn't move the ball that well. Like this was a team when I watched them, I'm like, they have a great feel for each other because if you look at this core, they've been around each other for a very long time. And in some cases, these guys have developed around each other. And also, Evan Mobley's such a gifted passer. And I did a reaction to this. It was like a Stephen A. Smith segment where he's like, well, what are you going to do when in the playoffs when it needs to be in Donovan Mitchell's hand? And I'm like, see, the thing is, Evan Mobley could get the ball to Donovan Mitchell. Like that's the thing that changes this.
I don't know if you saw the Draymond Green quotes from the other day when he was talking about the Cavs, and specifically their ball movement, what you were mentioning there. And look, Draymond has been in this league for a long time now, and he was like, I don't know if I've ever seen a team move the ball the way that they are moving the ball. And how challenging it was to defend them in that way. You just almost can't keep up. But I do think you make a good point on like the fact that they were developing together, kind of learning each other's instincts. I think that allows them to move the ball so quickly in that way because you're making these decisions so quickly that you really have to have a trust in each other that I think they've
Mm-hmm.
just can only develop with time. And so I think that's been really helpful for them. But yeah, seeing Draymond, as much as I like to hate on Draymond, for him to give that type of compliment is that's a ringing endorsement for
I
sure.
mean, especially you consider some of the teams he's been on and some of the ball movement that they've had on
Yeah.
those teams. Like, and Draymond's like the chief architect of like what allows you to do those
Yeah.
things, right? And if he's sitting there like, yeah, man, they're a really difficult defender. I think the other thing that makes them a lot more unique is even when you look at like the Spurs, if the ball stopped on the 2014 Spurs, it was really only Kawhi Leonard who can take it from the 3-point line and get you a bucket. The
Yeah.
thing with the Cavs is like, three of these guys can take you from the perimeter.
Yeah.
and get you a bucket, right? Like Evan Mobley, he's starting to develop that, but Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland are bona fide bucket getters.
Yeah.
And that ability to facilitate, their ability to catch and shoot on top of that, and their ability to drive, and then the drive being so filthy because the kick isn't even what you have to worry about. This the
Yeah.
hockey assist off the kick, right? Because we could pass out, kick to Isaac Okoro. You don't want to guard that, but you leave a passing lane wide open. Isaac sees Max Strus when he comes back at the top of the key, and that all of a sudden becomes an open shot. Or so many times where the kick comes back to the hoop, it's almost like a pick and pop, like reverse,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Where the guy who drove kicked can come back to the top of the key, and next thing you know, Donovan Mitchell has an open look at the top. It's almost like you know how like offensive rebounds can break a defense.
Oh yeah.
It's like they're controlling the chaos of an offensive rebound by being this good on drive penetration, pass. Like
Yeah.
it's such a unique way to play the game of basketball. And it's just interesting in this homogenized era of the NBA that we've been living in, where it's like 3-pointers. Everybody's been doing Daryl Morey ball for the
Yeah.
longest. And now you're seeing like, oh, Kenny Atkinson, he got this roster. He got real creative with it. And when
Yeah.
you watch the cast, they don't look like any other team in the league right now.
No. And I also don't want to discount like how important the bench has been in their role in
Mm-hmm.
all of this, because obviously the starters are really clicking on a level we haven't seen before. But to have guys like Ty Jerome be able to step in for significant minutes, I think he's averaging like 16 or 17 minutes a game, which I don't know if anyone expected it to be at that level at this point in time. As much as I wanted to kind of clown on JB, a lot of times the bench just wasn't playing well. So it was hard to find the right rotations at certain points in time when it was like, who else are you going to put out there right now? No one can hit a shot, or no one is, playing at the level that we need. So I think that's been really important too, to see these different guys step up. And I didn't personally expect that to happen, because I think all off season we were like, I mean, they got to probably get someone, right, after how everything kind of went towards the end of last season, and
Mm-hmm.
they felt good about the people that they had in that group, and I think they thought right, and they're, hopefully, obviously, it'll be streaky. That doesn't always continue throughout the whole season, but from what we've seen so far, the depth on that bench is really helpful too.
Yeah, it's definitely good. And like they're getting more out of some of the same players. Like George Niang isn't a
Yeah,
nuisance out there
yeah.
anymore. And then like give credit to Kenny Atkinson. He got the
Mhm.
codes to whatever machine powers Karis LeVert,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Because you know the joke, he gets possessed by a different NBA player. Well, he got the magic spell to get him possessed by like the right player every night, because he's getting consistency out of Karis LeVert. And if you go back to his Brooklyn days, he was able to get consistency out of Karis LeVert there, which makes you feel like, oh, this might not be just like something that's just happening because
yeah,
Karis LeVert is shooting out of his mind. And look, Karis gonna have a regression to the mean. Like it's gonna have a bad 2 weeks here, eventually. But I do think that he understands how to ride the flow of Karis LeVert better than JB, where sometimes JB will ride Karis LeVert straight to hell, right?
yeah.
Like that was the thing where it's like, okay, JB, we got to take him out the lineup, right? And he didn't have a good read on when it was going to be one of those nights for
Yes.
Karis LeVert.
I
And I
think
think Kenny
Yeah, I
has a
was just
good
gonna
read
say
on
that's
it.
the biggest thing that Kenny has done is like make those decisions quickly. I feel like JB
Mm-hmm.
was always like, no, this was my game plan. This was my mindset going into this game. I'm not straying from it. Like this is what I have a belief in. And he said in his post game press conferences being like, hey, this guy had the hot hand, or this rotation was working, or, X, Y, and Z, where he is comfortable, changing his mind on things, which I think has been the biggest difference between the two of them. How do you think JB is feeling right now watching this? Like, what is going through his head?
I keep thinking about it because I'm like, I think JB kind of understands. Like in JB's head, he's gonna be like, they weren't healthy last year. We
Yeah,
won like 55 games the year before. They got better over the last 2 years. Like it's easy for JB to rationalize this. I
yeah,
wonder how Piston fans are feeling, right? Because could you imagine if like the Browns hired Mike McCarthy or something like that, and then the Cowboys finally reached their potential? Like
yeah,
with the new guy that they hired,
yes.
and we're gonna be sitting here like, oh my god, did we hire the problem?
I'm
Like, is
trying to
that
think
the
if there's an NFL comp for that that's existed because I feel like there has to be, but nothing is coming to mind. But
there's
yeah, that's like the
definitely
scenario.
what like Andy Reid, right? Andy Reid goes to Kansas City after
It's,
leaving Philly, and then
yeah,
Philly like stinks for like a couple of years, and then they get somebody else. And I got to think a little bit deeper into the bag, right? But there's been examples of like,
yeah,
okay, you fired this coach.
yeah. You just feel so
Um,
stupid then. Like you're like, really?
it's like, oh, I guess he really wasn't the problem, right? It's like
Yeah,
when Steeler fans advocate for firing Mike Tomlin. But
right.
yeah, it's got to be an awkward spot though, like because they it's not like you could point to, oh, they traded for like Brandon Ingram or something like that
Yeah.
and that fixed everything. It's like, no,
There's literally no other
no.
variable that you can point to. Like,
Yeah. And like on one hand, I bet he's happy. I bet he has good relationships with a lot of these guys on the team. They seem to respect him quite a bit. But on the other hand, like it can't help that you in the same division. Like that they gotta whip you too. That every
yeah,
time you look up at the standards, you gotta answer the question like, why couldn't you do that? You only finished in second place, right?
yeah.
It's a tough spot for JB to be in. But one of the things that's upcoming, I think the first game is tonight. Now, this isn't going to
Yep.
go up the same day that we record. So this game would have happened. But not the plan. I'm old. I keep
You're like,
confusing
I
these
can't keep up with
names.
new little things that the NBA is creating.
You
That is an
made
old
a
man there.
you made a post where it's like, oh, when your friends get married, it's hard to remember like the last names. And I'm like,
Yeah,
that's me with literally everything
everything. You're like, I
that's
can't
changed in my life since
change
2016.
anymore. Yeah, you hit an age where change just like it's tough to come around to.
I'll tell you, if you were born in like 95, 93 to like 98,
Yeah.
2016, that's the mark off for like, okay, things I
Yes.
understood. And it's like everything else is just new. Like if
Yep.
it didn't happen in 2016, I'm going to have a hard time instinctively remembering it.
100%.
Um, but I bring that up to say that the in-season tournament, the NBA Cup, is it with the Emirates NBA Cup now? They sold the naming rights to it already.
Of
The
course they did.
the NBA Cup is starting, and I am somebody who thinks that. Do you watch wrestling, Gab? Have you ever watched wrestling?
You know, I've watched it, can't say I know anything about it or,
Okay.
have a lot of knowledge
In
behind it.
pro wrestling, this would be good because then I can explain this to the audience if they didn't watch
Love
wrestling
that.
too. So in pro wrestling, they have a couple of mechanisms for, when somebody's not John Cena yet, but they trying to get them to be the next John Cena or get you to see them in a different light, right? They're like, okay, we're trying to build this guy up and let you know that he's going to be a big time player in the future. He's not there yet, but we're going to let you know he's a big time player. They have the Money in the Bank, the Intercontinental Championship, right? They call them mid-card belts or things that basically are signifiers to say, hey, this dude's next up. Watch him, right? It's like getting most improved or all rookie of the year or something like that. Like it's that same kind of vein. I think that's what the NBA Cup should be. It's like it doesn't mean much when LeBron wins it, right?
Right.
Because like, okay, LeBron won it.
Up
But
and
I
coming
do
LeBron
think
James that no one knows about yet.
yeah, but I think it does matter if you're a team that hasn't broken through yet. It hasn't really been in that NBA title conversation to win something when it matters, when there's stakes, when people are playing really hard in a tournament format. I think that matters for those teams. And I think the Cavs are prime in there, right? If the Celtics win it, they already won a championship. It's not going to be something that they're going crazy for. But if you're a team like Minnesota, right, who did not get to the finals, or you're up and coming, like what's Oklahoma City, I think would be a team to get in here. And I think as fans, if you saw the Cavs
Hmm.
beat Oklahoma City in a game that mattered and
Yep.
meant something to both sides, that's going to further your confidence in the squad. And what that's going to do for the players on that team is further their confidence, right? Like the Cavs are a really good team, but they're still a young, inexperienced team. And they have had playoff failures in the past. And I think for them, they need to build the confidence to feel like they belong against this top competition that they're going to be going up against. And I think winning something like the NBA Cup is important for them to be able to prove that they can do, because when you just have a young team that's like starting to get to the prefaces, you want to win something, right? Because there's something about winning something that cements good habits, right? That cements good things for your team. And this NBA Cup is not the same as winning an NBA Finals, but it is something. Like you can
Mhm.
look back, say to the season, I won that. I beat these guys. You know, Donovan Mitchell had 40 points against the Celtics to get out of this one in Vegas. You get the extra money, which is cool too. But it brings the team together. Like, oh yeah, we came together, we won this, and that I think pays dividends down the road when you're struggling or you go down a game
Yeah.
where you're not expecting in the playoffs. So you're like, nah, man, like we were able to come together and make this happen. Like we won
Yeah.
the next up title. Like we gonna figure this out. We trust our guys. And I think that's why to me, I'm especially interested in this year's in-season tournament to see if that's something that the Cavs can do. And like it does, look what this did for Halliburton last
Yeah.
year. He turned into a star in
Yeah.
this tournament, right? Right now, the Cavs at the issue where like people don't still take them seriously.
Oh
And like
yeah.
you play the Celtics, that'll help you get over that hump. But if you have some great performances here, people are going to have to look at you and start checking for you a little bit differently. And I think the Cavs need that because you want to go into the second half of the season also being able to withstand teams giving you that best effort now that they take you seriously. You don't want to be a surprise, get to the playoffs, and then now teams are taking you seriously, and now you don't know how to handle it. Because we saw that happen with the Cavs the first years they made the playoffs under Donovan Mitchell, right? I think this is, to me, an important thing. How important do you think winning or competing for this in-season tournament is for the Cavs in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you were saying, I think they have a massive chip on their shoulder for the way that people talked about them last season, this off season in particular. I feel like all summer it was just kind of like, yeah, the Cavs don't really have that next level of what it takes to get there. And I think they all have taken that very personally. I also think that last year all of the players did talk about how they did play harder in all of these games that were the play in to get into the NBA Cup and then the actual NBA Cup. Like there was more effort put into that. And I think, like you said, having the Celtics in their original grouping is going to be really important for them to see what it's like to play. I think we always play the Celtics pretty hard, but to see what it's
Mm-hmm.
like to play them again in a game that does matter and does have some level of importance. I think you can learn a lot from that about, what you do well against them, things you might want to think about in the future. I think all of those are really valuable for a young team. Now, like you said, obviously the Lakers won last year, so it's not make or break to win it or not to win it. But I think it's more about what is happening in each given game that you are learning from and kind of building on for the future. And I think the biggest thing, like I said, is that chip on your shoulder that like we're gonna do this together. Like screw everyone who doesn't think that we can do it, doesn't think we have it. It's kind of for them, I think, about proving who they are. So I think that would be so valuable for them for sure.
Yeah, and if we just zoom out and just like this is, I think the in-season tournament is such a brilliant idea for the NBA because like the one thing about basketball in particular, there's something about a tournament that creates stars,
Yeah.
right? And with a lot of these guys no longer playing in March Madness, you have these guys who like people tell you they're good basketball players, but they're not really stars yet, right? Like I
Yeah.
remember the disconnect that people had, where it's like the scouting community was like, Wemby is the most hyped prospect since LeBron James, and I remember people being like, "Oh, I haven't seen much hype about him." It's like because he ain't playing college,
Yeah.
right? Like he ain't in them tournaments like you used to him being in the tournaments. Then that hype would be created. But now it's like they kind of got to create that hype on themselves and like make these stars in the in-season tournament. Like, yeah, for whatever reason, you put basketball players in the tournament. Like,
Yeah.
not only do they play hard, but people pay attention
Yeah.
and care about how these games end. And you can make a star out of it. And I think that's what happened with like Tyrese Halliburton. I'm excited to see if that can happen for not Donovan Mitchell, he's already a star, but like Darius Garland, right? A guy who people in the league, like if you ask somebody who plays in the league about Darius Garland, they think he's like great, like much better than people on like Twitter think he is. But he,
I I think too it matters more almost for small market teams. Like the ones who aren't getting play constantly on, national TV and are just, there's a lot of small markets in the NBA. I don't watch that much because they're not always on. So I'm not really
Mhm.
seeing those guys. So it is an opportunity for, as good as the Cavs have been, and they're 13-0 so far, at least hopefully 14-0 when you're listening to this, to start the season. Like there's probably a lot of people who have barely watched any of the Cavs because they're not available for them to watch. So I think that factor is a big deal too.
Yeah, it's like getting you in front of that national audience and like people being like, okay, well, let's see. Like, because a lot of people are like, well, let's see what they do against the Celtics in a game that matters. Let's see what
Yeah.
they do against the Thunder or the Nuggets, right? Whoever pops up. And this gives you the opportunity to get those games that wouldn't be on the schedule, and you get them in like a neutral site if you get to the semifinals too. So I think that I know people usually like to crap on ideas when they first happen, but like this in-season tournament, I'm like, nah, I
Yeah.
see the genius behind it. Like,
Yeah.
I think it does matter. I just think you got to make sure if you're the NBA, you're structuring things so you're not just making it another like, oh, we want Boston and LA to always win this. You got to make it so that these smaller markets or these lesser proven squads like feel like they have a chance to get through, because I think that's going to be the heart of the tournament is like these underdogs being able to win something, because it kind of feels like the title at the end of the year, it always goes through like these two big markets. You want to make sure that you give something for these up and coming smaller market teams to get
Yeah.
engaged with. And I think that that's a great thing for this Cavs team to aim for. Obviously, they need to aim high. Like I think they could be a conference championship team this year if they keep playing like this and stay healthy.
Mhm.
But that's the last thing I want to talk about before we head out on this Cavs talk. That's the most underrated thing about this Cavs team. Not only are they healthy, everybody's back, like, and they're not coming back from something, right? Like that was last year. 25% of the team was like coming back from something consistently
Yeah.
last year. And like it obviously affected Donovan Mitchell at times. It
Oh yeah.
obviously was affecting Darius Garland even when he was out there. Having this team not only be healthy, but healthy to a point to where nobody feels like they're like working off of something or they missed all of training camp and they couldn't do this and that. It's like, no, these dudes are back. They're in playing shape. Like they're ready to roll, and hopefully they can stay healthy for the rest of the year. And shout out to goatee Darius Garland. I just think it's a different vibe out there with the goatee. Like,
Yeah, maybe that's what did it for. Maybe it's protecting his face in a way from everyone who tried to take him out, through his face last season. I mean, the biggest thing with Darius too, when I think about, him being able to stay healthy, like the injuries he had didn't allow him to continue staying with his conditioning. And
mm-hmm.
I think we underestimate how important that is. I mean, even just as a fan, sometimes you're like, okay, why aren't you like fully back? You have recovered from this injury, like you should be fine. But he was able to, like when he was trying to recover from it, he wasn't really able to keep up with that conditioning and how much that affected him. So it makes me so happy for him to see him being kind of at that all-star level again that we had a couple years ago. And yeah, it's amazing what happens when you have actual time to play together as a team. Changes everything.
It does. It does. But it was fun having Ab on. Peace.